A modern skyscraper is built to last a century, Yet Roman harbors have been pounded by the relentless sea for 2 millennia, and they only grow tougher with every crashing wave. Look at the coastal bridges of our modern world. In less than 40 years, the salt air finds its way into the concrete, rusting the steel rebar until the structure expands, cracks, and eventually crumbles into the surf. We spend billions of dollars fighting a losing battle against the elements, right? But then, we look toward the Bay of Naples, to the ancient sunken city of Baiae. Here, the piers of the Caesars sit beneath the tide, encrusted with barnacles, but structurally as sound as the day the last mason laid his trowel aside. How did a civilization without electricity, without computers, and without our advanced understanding of chemistry out-engineer the modern world? This is the immortality gap, the unsettling realization that while our greatest achievements are quietly rotting away, the ruins of the Roman Empire refuse to die. In the eyes of a Roman engineer, we are simply building sandcastles. They were building for eternity. They understood a secret about the earth itself, a way to harness the raw, chaotic power of volcanic fire and turn it into a stone that thrives on the very thing that destroys our own, the relentless, corrosive salt of the sea. As we stand over these ancient, unyielding stones, we have to wonder if we didn't just lose their empire, but also the blueprint for a future that actually lasts. For nearly 2,000 years, the Pantheon has stood in the heart of Rome, its massive dome defying the weight of gravity without a single strand of steel to hold it together. It is, a total architectural miracle. To the modern eye, it seems like an impossibility, a glitch in the timeline of human progress. We look at our own cities, where skyscrapers of glass and steel are built with the pinnacle of 21st century engineering, yet somehow they begin to show the scars of time before a single generation has passed. We see the fractures in our highway overpasses and the crumbling of our coastal piers, right? And for centuries, we told ourselves a comforting lie, that the Romans simply had the advantage of infinite labor and massive over-engineering. History books often framed the survival of the Colosseum or the Great Aqueducts as a stroke of pure geographical luck. The official story was centered on a single ingredient, pozzolana ash. The Roman architect Vitruvius wrote extensively about this chocolate-colored volcanic sand found near Mount Vesuvius, claiming it possessed a singular property that allowed structures to harden even under the waves of the sea. We believed that because the Romans lived in a volcanic gold mine, they stumbled upon a recipe they didn't fully understand, a primitive mix of lime and ash that just happened to be durable. But this explanation created a frustrating paradox for modern science. We had the Roman texts, you see. We had the chemical analysis of the ash. We had the finest laboratories in the world. Yet every time modern engineers tried to recreate Roman concrete using the exact proportions described by the ancients, the results were underwhelming. Our replicas lacked the strange regenerative power of the original. Our perfect modern concrete is rigid and brittle, destined to be torn apart by the expansion of rusted steel and the steady infiltration of water.
We dismissed the ancient ruins as relics of a simpler time, static monuments that survived only because they were built too thick to fail. We convinced ourselves that we had surpassed the masters of the past. However, as the salt spray of the Mediterranean continued to lash against ancient harbor walls without leaving a mark, scientists realized the official story was missing a chapter. We weren't just looking at a different recipe, we were looking at a different kind of alchemy. One small white detail had been staring us in the face for centuries, dismissed by generations of researchers as a sign of poor craftsmanship. Little did we know, those tiny imperfections were the key to an immortality we are only now beginning to understand. But to find the truth, we had to stop looking at the concrete as a finished stone and start looking at it as a living organism. To truly decode the secrets of the stone, we must first descend into the minds of the men who commanded it. The Roman engineer, the architectus, was far more than a simple builder. He was a geological alchemist, a master of the Earth's own temperamental elements, who viewed stone not as a cold, dead material, but as a living medium to be tamed. In the dusty, preserved scrolls of Vitruvius, the legendary architect of the 1st century, we find an almost religious obsession with the earth itself. You see, he didn't just look for materials, he hunted for them. Vitruvius spent years cataloging the volcanic sands of the Italian coast, particularly the red and gray powders of Pozzuoli. I mean, to the Romans, this wasn't just dirt. It was a gift from the subterranean fires of the gods, a substance that, when touched by water, possessed the power to turn fluid into an eternal solid. This reveals a profound psychological shift between their world and ours. Today, we build for the next fiscal quarter, right? We build for the 30-year mortgage, the temporary convenience, and the planned obsolescence of a modern city. But the architectus served a different master, the eternal empire. These men didn't build for profit. They built for glory. They viewed their concrete as a physical manifestation of Roman dominance, a legacy designed to outlast their names, their families, and even the very gods they worshipped. Every bridge, every arbor, and every dome was a calculated strike against the passage of time. They weren't just pouring foundations, they were weaving the very fabric of Rome into the crust of the earth. Yet even with their grand vision and their masterful selection of volcanic ash, there was a hidden variable they introduced into the mix, a specific, aggressive technique that would remain a mystery for 2,000 years. Because, as it turns out, the most important part of the Roman secret wasn't just what they put into the concrete, but the violent way they forced it to come alive. For centuries, those who peered into the jagged edges of Roman monuments saw what they believed to be a failure. Somber, scattered throughout the legendary gray stone were thousands of tiny, white, brittle chunks. To the modern eye, you see, these were mere eyesores, imperfections known as limeclasts.
For decades, the consensus in the scientific community was dismissive, almost arrogant. Researchers looked at these white specks and saw the debris of a hurried, sloppy workforce. They assumed the Romans simply hadn't mixed their mortar long enough or thoroughly enough. It was a comforting thought for the modern world, right? A way to believe that for all their grand arches and towering domes, the Romans were still primitive builders who couldn't even achieve a smooth, consistent mix. But this assumption was the greatest blind spot in the history of architecture. A startling realization has recently emerged from the labs of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and it has turned our understanding of ancient engineering upside down. These white chunks weren't accidents. They weren't the result of a lazy laborer or a poorly stirred vat of mud. They were a deliberate, microscopic engine of immortality buried deep within the stone. The Romans were practicing a form of high-heat alchemy that we are only now beginning to comprehend. They weren't just mixing lime with water. They were using a process called hot mixing. By introducing the lime in its most reactive, quick state, they triggered a chemical furnace within the concrete itself. This created temperatures so high that the lime didn't fully dissolve. Instead, it formed these tiny, concentrated reservoirs of calcium throughout the structure. This was the white flaw, the secret weapon of the Caesars. You see, when a Roman seawall or a bridge begins to crack after a century of use, something miraculous happens. Rainwater or seawater seeps into that tiny fracture and hits one of these white clasts. The water reacts with the concentrated lime, creating a calcium-rich solution that flows into the gap and literally recrystallizes. The concrete heals itself. While our modern structures are designed to slowly die from the moment the ribbon is cut, Roman concrete was designed to wake up. It was a reactive, living material that used the very elements of its own destruction, water and wear, to reinforce its strength. But the chemical genius of the lime clasts is only half the story. To truly understand how Rome built a world that refuses to crumble, we have to look past the ingredients and into the shadows of their most prestigious construction sites. Because there is one final, terrifyingly effective ingredient the Romans used, one that changed the very molecular density of the stone, and it's something no modern contractor would ever dare to attempt.
The air at a Roman construction site was thick with the suffocating sense of sulfur and the searing heat of a furnace. This was not the polite, sterile mixing we see on modern building sites today. It was nothing like it. This was an alchemical battlefield. Imagine the scene. Thousands of years ago, Roman engineers were not just stacking bricks, they were wielding fire to forge stone. Instead of quenching quicklime in water, a step that would have resulted in a standard, predictable lime putty, they took a much more dangerous path. They threw quicklime directly into a violent mixture of volcanic ash and rock. The reaction was immediate and chaotic. Steam roared from the vessels as the intense dry heat caused the quicklime to react with the raw ingredients in a state of high energy agitation. This was hot mixing. It was a volatile, high-stakes process that required absolute mastery over the elements. By bypassing the traditional cooling phases, they were essentially trapping a high-energy chemical state inside the very heart of the concrete.
These white, jagged chunks you see embedded in the walls of the Pantheon, these are the lime clasts. For generations, they were dismissed by modern experts as a sign of lazy craftsmanship, a byproduct of poor mixing. But as it turns out, how wrong they were. Those clasts are in fact a concentrated reservoir of calcium. They are the Roman architects' sleeping giants. When a crack forms in the wall and water begins to seep in, the water dissolves these pockets of lime, turning them into a supersaturated solution. As it flows into the fissures, it recrystallizes, effectively knitting the concrete back together from the inside out. It is a self-healing armor that has outlived the empire that created it. But if the Romans knew that adding quicklime at the moment of peak heat was the secret to immortality, why did it take us 2,000 years to figure it out? The truth is far more unsettling. You see, because the concrete was only the beginning, there was another, even more audacious secret they buried beneath the foundation that completely defied the laws of structural physics. Imagine a Roman seawall 2,000 years ago, standing defiant against the relentless assault of the Mediterranean tide. For centuries, the weight of the ocean and the shifting of the earth have conspired to destroy it. Finally, the pressure becomes too much, and a jagged crack, a violent wound, splits the ancient stone. In our modern world, this would be the beginning of a slow, inevitable collapse. Water would seep in, corrode the internal supports, and turn the entire foundation to rubble. But the Roman spirit, it was engineered for eternity. As the seawater rushes into the fresh fracture, it does not erode the structure. Instead, it awakens a sleeping giant. Deep within the gray mass, the liquid encounters those mysterious white specks we call lime clasts. Think about it. The moment the water touches them, a microscopic transformation begins. The lime dissolves into a concentrated calcium-rich solution that surges through the crack just like blood rushing to a wound. It is a living scar. Within days, this solution recrystallizes into solid stone, literally knitting the concrete back together from the inside out. The void is filled and the fracture is sealed right before it can ever threaten the grand design of the empire. This isn't just clever construction, is it? It is a chemical reflex, a 2,000-year-old immune system that treats damage as a catalyst for renewal. The Romans didn't just build monuments. They created a material that possessed the very spark of life. Yet, as miraculous as this self-healing armor is, it was only a fraction of their genius, because while the concrete was repairing itself on the surface, the architects of the ancient world were burying a far more unsettling secret beneath the foundations, one that suggests they understood the very fabric of the earth in a way that truly defies the modern laws of structural physics. The secrets buried beneath our feet, they are not merely remnants of a forgotten age. They are a direct challenge flung across the millennia. While our modern cities rise quickly, soaring glass monoliths that demand constant repair, energy-hungry giants designed to degrade the moment the last crane leaves the site, the Roman legacy stands in stubborn defiance of time. It is a haunting juxtaposition. We build for the quarter, the decade, the disposable convenience of now, while they build for the infinite.
This wasn't just engineering. It was a profound communion with the earth itself.
The Romans understood that to build something that lasts, you cannot work against nature. By utilizing volcanic ash and lime, they turned the very fire of the earth into a binding agent that, when stressed by the elements, actually strengthened its internal matrix. It is a self-repairing alchemy, right? That turns the slow decay of time into a mechanism for survival. Today, we stand at a crossroads. The production of modern cement is responsible for a staggering portion of global carbon emissions, a heavy price to pay for structures that begin to crumble within a human lifetime. We have built a world that is fundamentally fragile. But what if we looked back to move forward? If we were to adopt these ancient methods, the intelligent use of reactive materials, and the foresight to build for permanence rather than profit, we could fundamentally alter the footprint of our civilization. We have the chance to transform our future from one of constant maintenance and waste into one of enduring strength. We have the blueprint. The dust of the immortals is literally beneath our sandals, waiting for us to rediscover the wisdom of our ancestors. Does this revelation change how you look at the crumbling infrastructure around you? Is it time for us to abandon the philosophy of the disposable in favor of the eternal? Share your thoughts on whether we can truly bridge the gap between ancient wisdom and modern necessity in the comments below. If this journey through the echoes of the Roman world stirred your sense of wonder, subscribe to Hidden Epic Narratives for more stories carved in stone and time.